those of us who show in the United States, we have an opportunity to show an exhibit at fairly frequent intervals with the national shows that we have, and it may mean that I go across the country or elsewhere. And what I do is I track all of my points by category, and I have found this to be an extremely useful tool in helping me understand where I need to focus in my exhibit. Obviously, I have had opportunities to go over things with judges or exhibitors, but when you get the points, it really helps to focus the mind. So you can see, for example, here, these are the maximum points that you're permitted in this column here. When I first showed the exhibit in Chicago, 83, not too bad. And then 82, and then I got hit with a reduction of 13 points, which I claim as the all-time US record for loss of points in consecutive shows. So I'm actually very proud of that. And rather than losing my temper, what I did was I completely redid the exhibit and picked up not only the lost territory, but did better at 87. Then from that point forward, it's really a matter of trying to focus in on the various constituent parts. And one of the elements that I think is most particularly difficult when you're dealing with a lot of modern material is going to be the notion of importance. Because with all due deference to everyone who's going to be judging, there is a certain amount of both lack of clarity of what that criteria within the scorecard means. And in addition, there may perhaps be some misunderstandings on the part of both judges and exhibitors in terms of what it is and how you manage your importance in terms of your exhibit and how you get scored. So this is where I am. And okay, how can we better understand philatelic importance? One of the problems in trying to deal and understand this is it really is only relevant context of an exhibit. It doesn't exist in and of itself in our collections. If I were to open up any of your albums, for me to talk about the importance of items would be ludicrous. But I don't have an exhibit to show you here. I don't have other exhibits to show you here. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to deconstruct the meaning of the word importance from a philatelic exhibiting perspective so that we can better understand it and how to apply the term and particularly some of the challenges that relate to it for both the exhibitor and for judges. So in terms of trying to better define the term, what I did was I got my hands on this catalog of world rarities that was exhibited by members of the Club de Monte Carlo at New York 2016 some years ago. And in it, the book itself is page after page of these extraordinary rarities. And prior to the show opening, I was fortunate enough to be in the bin room and actually handle most of these items. And I felt that let me look at what's in this book and see if that helps us understand what philatelic importance is. Part of the problem here at the first is the book is talking about rarity. It's not talking about importance. But I would suggest that only important rarities would be published. You wouldn't necessarily publish unimportant items. And I went through the book and I analyzed what was there and found that of the 51 items that were in the book, only 14 of them were stamps off cover, and of the 14, 8 were being shown on account of there being largest known multiples or undivided unique singles, overprint and an color error wasn't helpful. Looking at the covers, they were dominated by unique frankings, multicolored frankings, bisex, earliest knowns. almost everything in there was from the classic period. I wasn't able to find anything that was particularly useful in terms of the geographic distribution. But let's see where we get to. So we have this particular item, which is a cylinder block of the 4 old penny Machen, which was amongst the first Machens that were issued in 1967. At the time of its issuance, this was the standard stamp for first-class postage within the United Kingdom. All that writing that you see below is basically the catalog hieroglyphics, the Stanley Gibbons reference, both in the concise and in the specialized catalog. And then the particulars of this item is it's got 2 bars of phosphor, original coated paper. The adhesive is gum Arabic, and it is printed in what we call head B. It is only one of 2 known. And does this item belong in one of the great rarities? And is this something that people lust after? Well, I do. But unfortunately, the market doesn't agree with me because this item has a market value of just a couple of £1,000. So if this were something from 1840, I think the valuation would be quite different. What about this modern item? Does this belong in the book that we just looked at? This is one of 2 known solo frankings of the halfpenny Machen. That's the cute little turquoise stamp that you see there. The stamp, when it was issued, was only issued as a makeup value. And the only time that there was a proper rate that you could use the halfpenny was for a couple of years within the British Armed Services postal system for about 2 years. And this is one of 2 known. The other is a postcard. And I was able to buy this on eBay for about $5. So clearly, I see this as an extraordinary rarity, but market doesn't seem to quite agree with me. Let's talk about importance as it's defined and used within the context of the FIP. There is a definition of the term within the general regulations, and the criteria for philatelic importance requires an evaluation of philatelic significance of the subject chosen by the exhibitor in terms of its scope, degree of difficulty of the subject, and the philatelic interest of the exhibit. One of the things that I find very interesting about this is that there really isn't much on the surface that the exhibitor can do to improve his/her importance score. The philatelic significance is what it is. The degree of difficulty is what it is. The philatelic interest is what it is. It is how you make, basically, once you select your topic, it would appear as though you have dialed in what your importance score is going to be. Continuing on to special regulation for the evaluation of traditional philatelie at FIP exhibition. In assessing the importance of an exhibit, consideration is given to how much of the key material of the chosen subject is present, the significance of the subject within the philatelie of the country or area exhibited, the significance of the subject on a worldwide scale. What this means is that an excellent modern exhibit with outstanding material and knowledge and treatment is often more important than a weak classic exhibit, but not clear whether or not that would come through in points awarded. The completeness of all the important aspects of a chosen area increases the importance of an exhibit, and excluding some important aspects is lowering. Now, what is that very interesting, I think, is here finally we get something that is finally controllable, 1 out of 3, which is how much of the key material of this chosen subject is present. There is a separate category at the FIP for modern philatelie, And in this, what they've done is what normally in most normal exhibits, non-modern, importance is given 10 points. In modern exhibits, it's only 5 points, which I find kind of interesting. And it basically seems to presume that modern material has an importance problem or an importance issue as compared to more classic material. Let's now turn to something that is probably not that relevant for you in Europe, but is relevant for me, but is also useful. It's looking at how this is treated within the American Philatelic Society, which has a manual of philatelic judging and exhibiting, which is distinct from the FIP rules, although there is a close connection. In here, the criteria for importance requires an evaluation of importance of the development of the postal system, importance to the region, philatelic significance of the subject, and the philatelic interest of the exhibit, which all brought together is philatelic importance. So if we line up these criteria for the APS and the FIP, other than the philatelic interest of the exhibit, you will see that they land on the same one of the criteria, they're on the same place. And that is that it is driven by the philatelic significance of the subject in terms of its scope. Those are shared by both the FIP and the APS. I'm not really going to get into the philatelic interest of the exhibit because, I mean, what's interesting for me may not be interesting to you. But let's now delve deeper and understand what philatelic significance really is and how you can manage that in the context of your exhibit. The other criteria that are there for the APS and the FIP is not shared items such as degree of difficulty of the subject. This isn't going to help us. Importance to the region, it answers a question with more questions. And then importance to the development of the postal system, and that is perhaps helping us here. One might suggest that the relationship between the development of the postal system and importance is critical to our understanding of what the term means or could mean and how to apply it. And perhaps this could capture significance, interest, regional importance, and even difficulty. Okay. Let's ask a very, very practical question. We have 2 stamps here. One of them is the first adhesive stamp ever issued, the penny black. It's plate 1A. And the other is this halfpenny Machin, which was issued in 1971. Which one of them is more important? Well, it's not really fair, is it? That penny black would be used as the primary stamp for sending ordinary inland mail within the UK at the time, whereas the halfpenny is just useful as a makeup. Okay, how about these 2? Both of these are intended to provide sufficient franking at the time to send a letter within the United Kingdom. One is the penny black, and the first and the second is this Machin that was issued in 1967. I think it's fair to say that we would all probably agree that that penny black is more important than that 4-penny Machin. Now, let's understand why that is and why we have come to that conclusion. Well, the penny black is more important because it was the first postal label. It was the first postal label with an adhesive. It used innovative security printing methodology. In the background, there's mechanical engraving that is very difficult to duplicate. And the innovative use of other security measures, such as the letters down at the bottom and the cancellation mark, all of which I think point to the importance of the stamp to the development of the postal system. It was then very, very quickly replaced by the penny red. And what we have here is a penny black and a penny red. They were actually printed, these ones were actually printed from the exact same plate, same position. One was printed in black, one is printed in red. The penny red is significant. It is important because it was an innovative enhancement to security measures. One of the issues with the penny black is the cancellation mark was not really clear on the penny black stamp, and they recognized that the ability to really cancel that stamp would be enhanced if they moved the color of the stamp from black to red, which is what they did. And so you have, in essence, an important enhancement to security measures for preventing reuse of the stamp. And oh, by the way, it was the first color change in our world of adhesive stamps. So all of this comes to point to the development of the postal system. Now, let's take a brief look at the catalog, Stanley Gibbons' concise catalog for the early Great Britain line engraved. And the main headings are imperforate issues, paper more or less blued, then perforated issues, penny value, new colors, 2 pence, and letters in all 4 corners. The primary criteria in the catalog is perforations, paper, and letters in 4 corners. What is secondary are watermarks, the dye that was used, the alphabet, that is the actual fonts used on the stamp, which is changed, and the perforation gauge. All of which I think as we go through will speak to the development of the postal system. So one way to look at the 1 penny 1840 to 1879 issue over time, as you could tease it out of the catalog, is you start from the penny black, move to the penny the penny red. There's then a change in alphabet, which is really the font used, alphabet 2. We then had experimental perforations. These are the Archer perforations. Then governmentally perforated at 16, at 14, change in dye, large crown watermark, another font change, white paper, and letters in 4 corners. And if we were to go back to the catalog, you could see all of this unfolding in the context of the catalog and the way that it's laid out. So as a practical matter, what can we infer about importance from the catalog? Firsts are more important than lasts. A black is more important than a penny red with letters in the 4 corners. First, more important than last. Decisive turning points in postal development are more important than minor tweaks to postal technology. So in other words, Archers, which were the first meaningful attempt to perforate stamps, are far more important than the switch from small to large crown watermarks. Visible developments tend to be more important than invisible developments. So the switch from black to red ink is more important than the blue to white paper. And ultimately, the catalog presentation of these 1 penny issues attempts to reflect what is important as derived from a very, very long collaboration between the collecting community and Stanley Gibbons. So let's take this as background and see how this reflects on a modern stamp. Well, these are the Machen stamps that satisfied the first class franking requirement from 1971 to 2016. I gave up updating this because it just got too long. You're looking at a multitude of stamps with reflecting 33 rate changes over 45 years. And your eyes are probably rolling into the back of your heads looking at all of these things and what are we going to do with them? And oh, by the way, those were denominated stamps. I think you may know that the Brits also have stamps that are non-denominated and show a value only for first or second class stamps. So you have another 7 changes in color over a 26 period. So that's 40 stamps just for the inland first class rate over a 45 period of time. And then we have the Machen catalog. On the left is the detailed listing that is, you can see in the concise stamp catalog. And next to it is the summary where you can see the values, and it helps you identify where you can be. The one on the left shows all the quote main varieties, but your eyes are probably glazing over. If your eyes want to glaze over more, there's another Machen catalog, which is very, very well known in my area of the world, which is called the Degum catalog. And at this time, which is the edition from 2010, for my single 1/2 penny Machen, it lists 3 levels in the catalog. The top level is 1 listing, the second level is 11, and the third level is 135 listings for this 1/2 penny stamp. Gibbons, in its own catalogs, concise shows 4 listings, specialized is 9. So you can imagine, multiplied against all of these first-class rate stamps, we have an extraordinarily large number of listings. It's too vast to comprehend. So, what you draw from this is there can't obviously be anything that's important here, huh? So before we try to tackle this a bit more, I'd like to spend just a short period of time and give you a basic overview of the Machen series. The reason it's called the Machen is because Arnold Machen is the artist who created the sculpture. It's not a drawing, it's a sculpture of the late Queen. You can see him at work here. You can see the completed sculpture. It's what we would call a bas relief in English. And then down below, you can see the 4 penny, which is the first class rate when issued in 1967. And next to it is penny black, and there's no issue. But Mr. Machen very, very much drew on the inspiration of penny black in creating this stamp for Britain. Even to the extent that both Queens Victoria and Elizabeth were wearing the same crown. Let's talk a moment about the Machen photogravure process. It's printed via photogravure. You start with a sculpture. You then take a photograph of the sculpture. That gives you an image. You then take a value tablet image. You press those together, create an internegative where both the value and the image of the Queen are combined. You then lay that onto photogravure, photosensitive tissue. That tissue is placed onto a plate, exposed to chemicals. It etches the plate. That gives you the plate, and then you go off and you start printing. This has been simplified, but that's basically how it's done. Well, we use a photograph of a 3-dimensional object, and here you've got the 3-dimensional object. It has been lit in a different manner in all 3 ways, so there is a certain amount of subtlety here, depending upon how you light the image of the Queen. And we haven't even discussed about any differences if you move the camera just a short amount. It has lots of subtleties, and those subtleties of the different images based upon lighting and positioning comes through in these 3 stamps here, which down at the bottom you can see different characteristics of the Queen's chest and the way that falls there. All is a function of how that 3-dimensional object was photographed. Let's talk about the geography of the face of the stamp. You have the head, which is obvious. You have the value tablet, here 10p, and that can be different based upon different fonts, weights of those fonts, and the relative positioning to the head, because that can move around. There are also different varieties based upon regional versions of these stamps where they put images that are significant for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales, and for a short period of the Isle of Man. The stamp also has variation based upon the value That's clear. 4 penny, 11.5 pence, and first class for sterling, decimal, and no value indicated stamps. Color treatment. The background of the color here can be a solid or it can be graduated. The one in the center, the half penny, you'll see it's dark background towards the left, and as you move right, it lightens up. And then the 9 pence stamp is a bicolor. Security measures, they put in what we call elliptical perforations on the here. Later on, they introduced security slits that if you attempt to pull the stamp off the envelope, it'll leave the security slits on the paper. And in the background here, there's an iridescent underprint. Phosphor, the yellow overlay that I've put in here represents how you can lay down the different phosphor, which is either 2 bands, center band, left band, right band, or all over. What can't you see? You can see coatings on the paper, either original coated paper, fluorescent coated, or non-fluorescent coated paper, adhesives, polyvinyl chloride, gum arabic, or polyvinyl chloride plus dextrin, and self-adhesives, and perforation equipment can also differ. So if we go back to the catalog and look at the catalog, you will see that it basically has a structure that breaks in terms of traditional elliptical perforations or security slits, and then underneath that, denomination, color, phosphobands, and adhesive. Okay? This structure basically presumes that the importance of the development of the postal system is irrelevant for modern stamps such as the ancient, and that we're at the end of history for modern philatelie as expressed in the structure of the catalog. And why am I saying that? Because you can't discern anything happening in terms of postal technology from the structure of the catalog. And to be perfectly frank, the catalog for modern material is generally intended to serve the needs of philatelist stamp collectors who want to know, what do I got here? Where does it go in the album? What do I do with it? Not trying to actually understand and comprehend its meaning and how it integrates into the past and projects forward into the future. And there is a flow, and there is a future, and it is development. And the developments are every bit as important as the development of that 1 penny stamp from 1840 to 1879. You start off with stamps that were printed on what we call original coated paper. They then changed that to fluorescent coated paper. You then changed the adhesive with dextrin being added. You introduce elliptical perforations, new floors, that's types of fluorescence. You re-engrave the stamp, just like a die, new die. You have non-fluorescent coated paper, self-adhesive, security slits, and then iridescent underprinting. There is progress. There are things going on. There is a development of the postal system that you would never know if you opened up that catalog. Let's take a look at an alternative view of a Machen catalog. In the current and modern world of photography or printing, are the color of the stamps necessarily the primary criteria for differentiation? On the left, that 3P is some sort of magenta, and on the right, that 3P is a shade of blue. And those are clearly very, very different stamps, right? We all agree with it. Now, down below, those two stamps are actually the same stamps. They are both the same position, printed from the same plate, plate 11. One is black, the other is red. And if I were to open up the Gibbons specialized catalog that's relevant to this, they all come within the same fundamental heading. Whereas if you go into Gibbons for those two Machens, no, not there. Should the value tablet and the color of stamps necessarily be the primary criteria for differentiation. You've got a 9 here and an 87p. They, is that really the main difference in these stamps? In understanding the printing technique, one could suggest that different value tablets are as differentially important as the different check letters on a penny black, maybe even less so. These two penny blacks down at the bottom are from the same plate. And the only thing that's different with them is different position on the plate, and the letter punches were obviously different. We would almost in all instances consider these to be the same stamp, whereas the two Machens up at the top, we treat them as being two different stamps. An alternative view of a Machen catalog would have a different approach where denomination and color would be relegated to a more minor position, so that really what becomes important is the paper that you use, the security measures, the photogravure method, color, phosphor, adhesives, and denomination. The only difference in denomination is that single value tablet that is inserted into the internegative. Now let's look at a summary of postal development of the Machen series as compared to what I call the YN series. The YN is the medallion that preceded the penny black and had the image that was used in the penny black, which is that basic 1 penny stamp, which was issued from 1840 to 1879 in terms of the various criteria of postal development. In the Machen series, we had a lot of developments in terms of security features: elliptical perforations, security slits, and underprints. In the YN series from 1840 to 1879, it's black to red ink, 2 to 4 corners with letters, changes in watermarks, ease of use, self-adhesives, perforations. We don't think of perforations as making it easy to use, but we all know that. Processing efficiency, phosphor changes, and perforations. Think about how much easier it was to work in the post office and provide postal clients with stamps if the stamps were all perforated rather than having to cut them with a scissor. The impact of high volume printing, a re-engraved image, new dyes because you wore out the original dyes. Experimentation or happenstance, those head issues that I've referred to for Machens, phosphor formula changes, and the various types of adhesive that's used. For the 1840 to 1879 issues, 14 to 16 size perforations as you're trying to find the right size, paper changes, and bluing. How could this all be applied to a modern stamp? Well, we draw the same lessons we learned early on from that first set of British stamps, that firsts are more important than lasts. And there are still firsts. Self-adhesives as an example, security slits. Decisive turning points in postal technology are more important than minor tweaks to postal technology. So elliptical perforations are more important than horizontally formatted Machens, which most of you, if you don't collect these, you may not realize even existed. Visible developments are more important than invisible developments. Security slits and underprints are more important than blue jet phosphor. But would the catalog be changed to reflect a new orientation? Although there are other instances of the catalog being reworked, in this case, it's highly unlikely. Collectors out there, they got to know what they got, and they got to know where they need to stick it in the album. Why is this all important regarding catalog structure and its relevance to importance? One would suggest that the catalog inherently drives our understanding and evaluation of the material. Presented with a massive set of listings without any relationship to the structure of the classic listings, certain conclusions are inevitably drawn. Hence, we create handicaps of modern material. For example, an excellent modern exhibit with outstanding material knowledge and treatment is often more important than a weak classic exhibit. Modern material can demonstrate in the permutation and the various varieties of adhesives, phosphors, perforations, die cuts, changes in technology, the very, very same issues that pioneers such as Perkin Bacon, Henry Archer, and Rowland Hill were grappling with. It's no different. How can this be addressed as a practical matter? Well, part of it is innovative education of the philatelic public via exhibits and articles that strip away the veneer of these catalogs that are obsessed, in my view, with nitpicky philatelic trivialities. But until that process is undertaken, it's unlikely that important scores will necessarily reflect the true importance of the material, since that is obscured with the detail that effectively hides the importance to the development of the postal history. So what then becomes important is that in our exhibits, you need to recognize this and you need to push against it because history has not stopped. So this is the title page of my exhibit. And what I've highlighted here is me trying to push back. The halfpenny is, in many respects, a typical example of the Machen's exhibit series during the first 15 years of decimal production, showing all the fundamental elements of Machen's of the period and how these changed during this period of production. These changes were prompted both by a constant stream for high volume stamp production and the ever-increasing mechanization of the mail stream. These changes included the introduction of new papers and coatings, advances in adhesives, and fluorescence, planned and some perhaps unplanned. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to push back, and in my exhibit and title page, trying to educate my judges and viewers of what we've got here.